the Jasmius cam is on. Is my microphone on? Are my headphones on? The only reason I asked that is because when I downloaded yesterday's podcast for my archive, my personal archive, I discovered that 37 minutes of that podcast were missing, which I can only assume means that my microphone cut out for those 37 minutes, or at least there was not enough of the podcast that came through on the other side of the Skype connection to make it into the podcast. And I'll tell you what, I had no indication of that whatsoever. None. None of the telltale signs of problems with the Skype connection or even getting BTR'd came through. I didn't hear anything wrong in my headphones, nothing amiss on the screen, anything whatsoever, and yet somehow 37 minutes disappeared. So, now fortunately that wasn't for a too crucial a part of yesterday's pile of awesomeness, but still, it's, I tell you, it's something different almost each and every single day. Maybe I do need a new set of headphones, but I don't want to spend the 20 or so bucks that they would cost, but I'm probably not going to have a choice, especially once Constitution Radio with Douglas V. Gibbs resumes on KMET 1490 AM Smart Talk Radio, effective Saturday, May the 2nd, or 2 weeks from this Saturday. Mark that down in your day timers, put it in your schedules, write it on a post-it note, stick it to your monitor, tattoo it on the inside of your eyelids. Constitution Radio with Douglas V. Gibbs resumes on Saturday, May the 2nd, 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific, on KMET AM 1490 Smart Talk Radio. And of course, American Daily Review starting time will move back an hour to accommodate that. 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. So there will be a Saturday afternoon extravaganza once again, beginning on May 2nd, until such time as we move to weekdays in, evenings at the very least, afternoon drive perhaps, when we take off and start our meteoric ascent, when radio becomes an official second career rather than just something being done on a volunteer basis. That will be the day, ladies and gentlemen. That will be the day. And of course, today is August. Wow, time's not passing that quickly. Today is April the 16th. Well, it started with an A. April the 16th, 2015. The day, T+1. The day after Tax Day. Day after Tax Day on HSR. And of course, it's also Thursday, and this is the Hard Starboard Radio Network. Assuming anybody can hear a word I'm saying. At blogtalkradio.com/HSR Network. I am your host, Jasmius, your ruler, your benevolent despot, your fount and rabbi of conservatism, constitutionalism, Christianity, and common sense, Monday through Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. Guest call-in number 646-478-5068. Email address jasmius@comcast.net. The chat room is open, so come on in and sit down and shut up and listen. Well, you don't have to shut up if you're chuckling. But otherwise, clam up, button your lip, pay attention. And now, that's which is not to say that today is stack is heavy or grave in any way, shape, or form. It's all Hillary Clinton stuff, which means But trust me, folks, it is all very humorous Hillary Clinton stuff. I tell you what. Let's just say that the notion that Hillary Clinton is a political corpse is starting to get around. It hasn't torn down the conventional wisdom of Hillary's inevitability, but it's well on its way to doing so. Eventually, it's like I say, eventually everybody will agree with me on this, because it will become so pervasively obvious that nobody can maintain that degree of blind faith. The handwriting is going to be so indelibly on the wall that nobody will be able to avert their eyes from it. It'll burn through their eyelids. By the way, you ever wonder why Cyclops on the X-Men, how just two little flaps of skin obstructed his force beams that came out of his eyes? Anybody ever wonder about that? Eyelids, sunglasses. Why would that? These are force beams that can tear a hole through the roof of a building. And yet two little flaps of skin held them back? Really? I don't know. I just brought that to mind. I thought I'd just throw that out there. But no, it's already becoming apparent to anybody who wants to look, and there is as yet far too few people willing to look, that Hillary Clinton is a dead woman walking as far as her presidential candidacy is concerned. She's a god-awful politician, the most overrated politician in American history. What's another phrase today? A tricky Dicky Hillary. Hillary Milhouse Clinton. She's a god-awful candidate. She wore out her national welcome long ago. And I just, bring your attention back to who it was who declared that Hillary Clinton has zero chance at becoming either president or the 2016 Democrat presidential nominee. I'm holding up my hand for the Jasmine scam. It was me. I've been following, analyzing politics for 35 years. I think I'm pretty good at this by this time, I would like to think. And I can, see things, or I'm willing to look at things. So much of things like this, especially in politics, is peer pressure. It's just the herd mentality. Well, Hillary's inevitable, and so somebody says Hillary's inevitable, and if enough people say Hillary's inevitable, then, well, Hillary's inevitable. Well, how do you know? Well, that's what everybody thinks. Everybody knows that. Well, yeah, but is it true? Everybody knows that. Just shut up and accept it. This is why I say talking about Hillary Clinton just does not interest me unless it's funny. And today's today's Hillary-centric stack is very funny indeed. Or at least I found it very funny because it is so illustrative of Hillary's political irrelevance. Every image she's trying to cultivate is being totally bungled and undermined from within. There's a gang that can't shoot straight. Imagine $2.5 billion worth of this stuff. I tell you what, it's a sight to see, and I find it hugely humorous to be vindicated to this degree. It's funny. It's funny right there. If you don't think this is funny, you get the hell out of here, because this is funny right here. But anyway, we're going to talk about that today. And, I'm thinking maybe, I want to talk about things that I find entertaining about Hillary. And today's stack definitely qualifies. But, I mentioned the other day about how talking about Hillary Clinton as a serious political issue, a serious candidacy doesn't interest me because her candidacy isn't serious. She has zero shot, zero chance to go anywhere. If she didn't go anywhere in 2008, she sure as hell is not going to go anywhere in 2016. All right. But maybe I can, the next year, it's going to be impossible not to talk about Hillary Clinton. But maybe if I just save it up for, like one day a week or something. Just kind of batch stories about Hillary, and then that way I'm not talking about this barracuda this hag, this sack of boneless skin every single day. Because if I got to talk about Hillary Clinton every single day for the next year, you better hide the cliffs to jump out of. You better not let me get even to the second floor of any building for fear I might throw myself out the window, or the nearest window. But maybe just like in concentrated bursts. One day a week we'll have our Hillary Clinton day, and then we'll break the moratorium and talk about what is otherwise utterly and completely uninteresting to me. This may be one of those cases where I've said many times, I'll say it again, that much like Rush Limbaugh, what we talk about on the show is what interests me, because it's my show. But yet, Hillary Clinton's going to be all over the news every single day for the next year at least. So it's one of these things where, you can't not talk about Hillary. So this may be a case of, having to talk about something that doesn't interest me, but I'm still going to make it as entertaining to me as possible in order to make it worth your host's while. So that's what we'll be doing. I just draw your attention to the show page at blogtalkradio.com/HSR Network, where there are almost 8 years of podcasts for your downloading pleasure, your education, edification, enlightenment, and entertainment in all your life's endeavors. And, of course, over at blogtalkradio.com/American Daily Review, a featured podcast of Blog Talk Radio. And a production of the Hard Starboard Radio Network. You will find at blogtalkradio.com/American Daily Review over 5.5 years worth of podcasts awaiting your attention. And of course, American Daily Review, well, at least guest 1128 stayed for 6 minutes and 45 seconds. Of course, he just hung around for a little bit longer. I made reference to the stack, and then it was Hillary-centric, so if that's what you wanted to listen to, just have some patience, man. Have some patience. Don't dart in and out. 6 minutes and 45 seconds compared to one of the guests yesterday, which was more like 30 seconds. You don't get a flavor for the whole program unless you listen to the whole program. That's the bottom line. Unless that means my microphone is not working. Anyway, but I find that difficult to believe. Would anybody hang around for 6 minutes and 45 seconds of listening to nothing? Wouldn't think so. Anyway, and of course there are our YouTube channels. YouTube.com/HardstarboardRadio, the home of the jazmiest cam footage of the most listened to podcast of the week, each week. And YouTube.com/American Daily Review 2, the number 2. The home of each Saturday afternoon extravaganza, all 3 hours, all smushed together, uploads of which will resume after Saturday, May 2nd, and lasting as long as we're still relegated to Saturdays. And I should hasten to add that this Saturday, American Daily Review will air at its traditional historical time, 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific, but only for 2 hours. No third-hour podcast only portion. No afterglow, because I have travel plans for Saturday afternoon, and if I can leave an hour earlier to do so, I save myself the cost of having to get dinner out Saturday evening. I can hopefully have a dinner with my father, whom I'm going to visit this weekend. So, American Daily Review this Saturday, just ADR for the time being until Constitution Radio with Douglas V. Gibbs reemerges on Saturday, May the 2nd on AM 1490 KMET Smart Talk Radio. But this Saturday's American Daily Review, 2 hours only, just the streaming on-air portion. So no third podcast only hour, so I can get on the road an hour earlier. I think that's all the stuff, all the table setting that needs to be done. So, as I believe it was Jackie Gleason who once said this, and away we go. By the way, just looking at general headlines, running back Adrian Peterson has been reinstated by the NFL, which is probably inevitable, just so he doesn't wind up with the Phoenix Cardinals. He can go any place else he wants, just don't come to the NFC West, please. Oh, and what else here? Have you seen the newest Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Reawakens trailer? I was looking at Ace of Spades headquarters earlier this afternoon, and they remarked as to how at the end of the trailer, Harrison Ford as Han Solo makes his first trailer appearance anyway. And they were saying that, wow, they must have digitally touched up Harrison Ford because he only looks 45 instead of the 65 years of age he really is. And I'm looking at this, and to be honest with you, he looked 65 to me. I mean, I'm not sure exactly how much time is supposed to have passed between Episode 6, Return of the Jedi, and Episode 7, The Force Reawakens. Of course, that begs the question of where did the Force go? I mean, Luke Skywalker's still around, so the Force shouldn't have gone anywhere. And, Leia, that begs the question of, like in the Star Wars novels, the post-Episode 6 Star Wars novels, Han Solo and Princess Leia got married and had children of their own who both became, Jedi Knights. And I think eventually in the novels one of them turned to the dark side. Can't remember which one. Doesn't really matter. So I don't know in actual Star Wars canon whether they're going to establish that Han Solo and Princess Leia got married, but I don't know. Who knows? I mean, it was. I guess could say it was kind of implied at the end of Return of the Jedi, but at any rate, Han Solo, Harrison Ford as Han Solo in this Episode 7 trailer looked 65 to me. I mean, not that it really matters. I mean, and again, it depends on how much time is supposed to have passed. 20 years, 30 years. I find it difficult to believe that Han Solo would still be a smuggler. After the... Of course, that raises begs the question of whether the rebellion actually succeeded. Was the Empire overthrown? I mean, Palpatine was killed, certainly. The second Death Star was destroyed, but, I mean, wasn't the Empire more or less intact? I think sometimes Star Wars fans forget how Vader Skywalker-centric the second trilogy was. They were battling Darth Vader and Palpatine, Emperor Palpatine, but they hadn't taken down the entire Empire. I mean, unless the entire Empire is just going to automatically collapse if Palpatine isn't running it. It seems to me that the rebellion hadn't ultimately triumphed. It had scored a huge blow, certainly, but it hadn't triumphed yet. So maybe that's what Episode 7 is going to explore. I hope so. Otherwise, there's not going to be much of a story other than to, depict Luke Skywalker turning to the dark side. And if he didn't turn to the dark side after being tortured by Palpatine in Episode 6, then I don't see how that would happen. So, I don't know. We got till next Christmas to worry about this, and I'm not all that trailer happy anyway, but I just caught my eye that, did they digitally touch up Harrison Ford for this Episode 7 trailer? And I don't think they did. He looks just as grizzled and wrinkled as he did in Indiana Jones and Legend of the Crystal Skull. So, anyway, these headlines I'm looking at are from the London Daily Mail. Now, isn't it interesting? And we point this out often on these same Hard Starboard Radio Network stations, how you have to go to the British media to find out what's happening in the United States. Well, the London Daily Mail is all over this particular face plant of the nascent and retreaded Hillary Clinton for president campaign. Here's a headline. Campaign staff drove ordinary, quote-unquote, Iowans to Hillary's first campaign stop, including healthcare lobbyist in training who was an Obama campaign intern and Joe Biden chauffeur. His name is Austin Bird. He sat for coffee on Tuesday morning in the town of LeClaire, Iowa, chatting with Hillary Clinton as photographers snapped pictures. News reports called him a student, and her campaign called it an unscripted event, but Hillary's, Clinton is Bill Clinton in my mind, but Hillary's Iowa political director, Troy Price, drove Bird and two other people to the coffee house, and here's a hint, the other two people were plants as well. Bird is a hospital government relations official who interned with Barack Obama's 2012 presidential campaign. The Iowa Democrat Party, which Price ran until a month ago, tasked him to be Joe Biden's driver during an October Senate campaign trip in Davenport, Iowa. Now, Hillary Clinton's AstroTurf candidacy is in full swing in Iowa. Can you imagine such a lead in any American newspaper? I certainly can't. Her Tuesday morning visit to a coffee shop in LeClaire, Iowa, was staged from beginning to end. According to Austin Bird, one of the men pictured sitting at the table with Mrs. Clinton. I'm surprised that this guy actually admitted it. I mean, talk about going off the reservation. Byrd told the Daily Mail Online that campaign staffer Troy Price called and asked him and two other young people to meet him Tuesday morning at a restaurant in Davenport, a nearby city. Price then drove them to the coffee house to meet Hillary after vetting them for about half an hour. Apparently, Price didn't vet Mr. Byrd very well. The three got the lion's share of Mrs. Clinton's time and participated in what breathless news reports described as a round table, the first of many in her brief Iowa campaign swing. Byrd himself is a frequent participant in Iowa Democrat Party events. He interned with Barack Obama's 2012 presidential re-election campaign and was tapped to chauffeur Vice President Joe Biden in October 2014 when he visited Davenport. What happened is we were just asked to be there by Troy, Byrd said Wednesday in a phone interview. We were asked to come to a meeting with Troy, the three of us, at the It Takes a Village Inn. Actually, it's the Village Inn, but I like my version better. The other two, he confirmed, were University of Iowa College Democrats President Carter Bell and Planned Parenthood of the Heartland employee Sandra Sedlacek. Yeah, random, ordinary Iowans. Sure they were. It was supposed to be a strategy meeting, Byrd recalled, to get our thoughts about issues. But then all of a sudden he says, "Hey, we have Commissar Clinton coming in. Would you like to go meet her?" And then we got in a car, Troy's car, and we went up to the coffee house for a coffee clatch. Remember those from 1996? And we sat at a table, and then Hillary just came up and talked with us. Byrd said, we all were called. I mean, Troy asked us all to go to a meeting with him, and we didn't really know what it was about. I mean, he did. He knew. I bet he did. It's unclear how many Iowans featured in photographs with Hillary that rocketed around the country on Tuesday were planted. Probably all of them, I would imagine. I mean, the mayor of LeClaire, Iowa was there, and his wife was there, Byrd said, recalling the scene at the coffee shop. Price was executive director of the Iowa Democrat Party until a month ago. Hillary's team tapped him last week to be its political director in Iowa. He did to her comment. Yeah, I bet he wished Mr. Byrd had done the same thing. Byrd is a government and community relations coordinator at Genesis Health System in Davenport, Iowa, according to his LinkedIn profile. A co-worker at Genesis said Wednesday that Byrd is basically a lobbyist in training. That's what he wants to do. Byrd disagreed, saying his role was more public relations. 601, half dozen of the other. He's also an outspoken Obamunist whose Facebook wall shows he ordered a Hillary for President bumper sticker almost 2 years ago. Is it 2016 yet? He wrote in May 2013. Oh, man. Hillary's nascent campaign has carefully... I love this paragraph. Hillary's nascent campaign has carefully coordinated her image as a spontaneous handshaking populist. Carefully coordinated her image as a spontaneous handshaking populist. Oh, I told you it was funny. In her first days, actually, the resumption of her days as a candidate, posing with Pennsylvanians at a gas station and venturing into an Ohio Chipotle restaurant for lunch. And of course, as we all know, there's a story about that as well. We'll get here to in a moment. When no one recognized the former First Lady, she was wearing sunglasses, the campaign leaked information to the New York Times so its reporters could get security camera footage to prove she had tried to mingle with voters. Seriously? Nobody would recognize her? I mean, I know, well, I can understand averting her eyes. I mean, you know, look at Medusa, turn to stone, but I mean, it's rather difficult to believe that nobody would recognize her. Scripting supposedly off-the-cuff appearances is common in presidential politics, but could hurt Hillary especially hard since her gonzo road trip journey to America's broad Midwest is designed to counter her image as cold, calculating, and politically venomous. Instead, it's further cementing that image. And planting party insiders in place of typical Iowans won't go over well in the Hawkeye state, where pressing the flesh and collecting caucus votes is a quadrennial full-contact sport. Well, maybe they couldn't find any typical Iowans. Yeah, that's always possible. In fact, I guarantee it. Hillary's campaign has already taken heat for depicting at least 3 people in her campaign launch video as everyday Americans who are actually partisans with political connections. One was even a former campaign manager for Wendy Davis. Remember Wendy Falsey Davis? The Texas Democrat who mounted a failed bid for Texas governor last year. Oh, that's even better, man. A former Wendy Davis campaign manager. Oh, you can't write this stuff. In LeClaire on Tuesday, Bloomberg and other outlets referred to Mr. Byrd as a student at St. Ambrose University, not as a hospital government affairs staffer with Democrat Party street cred. He does study at St. Ambrose, part-time. But Byrd's ties to the Democrats are deep enough that his Facebook wall includes a photo of him standing in front of Joe Biden's limousine in Davenport. Looking at that picture right now. I was driving the vice president when he was in town in October, Byrd noted in a Facebook comment. Biden was not there on official government business, but for a campaign stop in support of Democrat defeated, losing Democrat Bruce Braley. The vice president will attend a grassroots event for Braley for Iowa with Representative David Loebsack. That's his name, huh? Loebsack. I know Ferengi has some strange anatomy, but come on, Loebsack, really? According to White House press guidance from his October 27, 2014 schedule, so nobody at this photo op was a genuine, everyday Iowan. Everybody who's surprised by that, stand on your head. Now, this whole business of hopping in a van and spontaneously going out to mix with the hoi polloi, first of all, there's nothing new about that either. That's what her first Senate campaign in 2000 did in New York. In fact, they nicknamed the van the Scooby-Doo van. I suppose they should have just called it the Mystery Machine, but maybe they didn't know if people would get the reference. But it was, kind of like the Mystery Machine. The Scooby-Doo kids rode around in it. I mean, I'm not. Which is not to say that Hillary's van is painted in psychedelic 70s-esque colors. It'd be funny if it did. Mystery Machine. That would have all kinds of double entendre, or triple entendre for that matter, possibilities. But the bottom line is, there's nothing new about it. She did it in 2000 in New York in her first Senate campaign, so she's just retreading that, and just taking that gambit, that strategy, that tactic, that angle out of mothballs, and trying to do it nationwide. But this story, I tell you what, there's a reason why Ace at Ace of Spades headquarters today referred to Hillary Clinton as a horrible, terrible person and a human train wreck. What he was referring to, you may be asking at this point? Well, at least one of her spontaneous stops in Iowa, they parked Hillary's van in a handicapped spot. I'm not making that up. Hillary's Scooby-Doo van, Hillary's Mystery Machine, was parked in a handicapped spot. And she didn't even get out of the van and use her walker to go into the diner or the whatever it was that she was ostensibly spontaneously visiting. Yeah, it does cleanse the palate, as Alla Pundit points out at hotair.com. But it is also a fresh reminder that Democrat politicians think the rules don't apply to them, even when it comes to parking. On the other hand, the thought of spending, at least the next year, digesting every move made by a political entity as dreary as Hillary Rodham Clinton, even as a goof a la the clip below, and there's a YouTube clip of this this human train wreck, makes me feel like Colonel Kurtz mumbling through that story about finding the pile of little arms. We now inhabit a political culture where stories like this one are published by the country's most respected newspapers. Once upon a time, they would have been published in the tabloids. Now the tabloids are more of a source of real news than the Oba media. Yes, that's right. Men in Black has actually become real life. You remember Men in Black, Agent K, Jay asked Kay, well, why are you getting like the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times? And Kay told him, no, the only real news, the only reliable source of news is the tabloids. Yeah, the Daily Star, the National Enquirer, so on and so forth. Well, New York Times, they might get lucky every once in a while. You remember that, right? Well, anybody in this audience certainly has seen the Men in Black trilogy. So we now inhabit a political culture where stories like this one, and like Hillary bypassed centrist Taco Bell for liberal favorite Chipotle, are published by the country's most respected newspapers. I cried. I wept like some grandmother. I wanted to tear my teeth out. I didn't know what I wanted to do. Indeed, Colonel, me too. Actually parked in a handicapped spot. On the other hand, a goof is a goof. If nothing else, this should give the Washington Free Beacon some new material for its long-running argument that Hillary Clinton is, in fact, for all intents and purposes, handicapped. I don't know why she didn't get out of the mystery machine with a walker. I mean, wouldn't that elicit public sympathy? I mean, if there is a less sympathetic figure in American politics than Hillary Clinton, I have no idea who it would be. So she got out of her mystery machine with a walker. I mean, first of all, that would technically, perhaps, maybe, kind of, sort of cover her mystery machine being parked in a handicapped spot, and it might actually garner her some sympathy. It would also accentuate her 90 years older than God age and appearance, but, American people are very vulnerable to pulling of the heartstrings. It would make her seem more genuine. I mean, it would be the diametric opposite. In fact, these times in which we live are diametrically opposite the ones in which Franklin Delano Roosevelt, for example, lived. Do you remember when he would not allow the media to take a picture of him with his leg braces on? Because, of course, he was a polio sufferer, so he was rendered unable to walk when he came down with polio in the early 1920s. And after, when he ran for president, and then all the time he was president, he never once let the media take a picture of him in his leg braces or in a wheelchair, because he didn't want the American people to see that. Because back then, America was a masculinist country. Today, early 21st century, we're well, whatever we are. I mean, we were feminized. Now we're then we were sodomized. Now we're being transsexualized. God knows what will be in another few years. But one thing we certainly are not anymore as a culture and as a country is masculine. So I think it would probably be a good idea if Hillary Clinton got out her walker and allowed herself to be seen using it. Whether she needs to or not, I mean, that would be perfectly in keeping with Hillary Clinton's utter lack of character. Darth actually works as a Sith double entendre there. Here's a good exit question. Do we as a people deserve Hillary Clinton? What if the answer is yes? That's another item on the stack, by the way. I believe it's... where is it here? Oh, yeah, it's at the Daily Beast. Well, I can't get the tab to come up. Oh, here it comes. Liz Mayer at the Daily Beast, you deserve Hillary's bloodless, condescending campaign. But before we get to that, I want to just make brief mention of another knee slapper. Another just typical Hillary. Another thing she said recently, referring to Hillary Clinton, is that all her grandparents were immigrants. Well, it turns out that's not actually the case. This is at BuzzFeed.com, Andrew Kaczynski pointing this out. Speaking in Iowa yesterday, former Commissar of State Hillary Clinton said that all her grandparents had immigrated to the United States, a story that conflicts with public census and other records related to her maternal and paternal grandparents. The story of her grandmother specifically immigrating is one Clinton has told, or rather Hillary has told before. Hillary's sole foreign-born grandparent, Hugh Rodham Sr., emigrated as a child. Her grandparents always spoke about the immigrant experience, and as a result, she has always thought of them as immigrants. A Hillary spokesman told BuzzFeed News. In other words, that's the spin. Wow! She's always thought of them as immigrants because of all the stories about the immigrant experience. But no, she actually called them all immigrants. She said that. She makes that claim. She has made that claim repeatedly. And it's not true. It is a lie. Or as Ambassador Spock might have put it, an exaggeration. Or an error. No, it's a lie. Calculated deception. As has been correctly pointed out, while her grandfather was an immigrant, it appears that Hillary's It only appears after BuzzFeed bothers to do a little digging and finding this out. I mean, by the way, you know where they went to find this information? Ancestry.com. That's right. That's how easy it is to find this stuff out. It appears that Hillary's grandmother was born shortly after her parents and siblings arrived in the U.S. in the early 1880s. And then there's a long Hillary quote here. Which I don't even want to bother going into. Now, Hannah Jones Rodham, Hillary's paternal grandmother, the wife of Hugh Rodham Sr., was born in Pennsylvania in 1882, according to the 1910 census. Hugh Rodham Sr. was born in England and immigrated with his parents as a child, according to records. A much cleaner 1920 census form also lists her maternal grandmother's birthplace as Scranton, Pennsylvania. This is in the 1920 census, the 1930 census, the 1910 census. This is not difficult to find. An article in the Irish America by an ancestry researcher sent to BuzzFeed News by the Clinton campaign also noted Hannah Jones was born in Scranton, Pennsylvania. Wild, exotic, foreign Scranton. Or maybe they meant like Scranton, Latveria or something. I don't know. All of the Clintons' grandparents were born in the United States with the exception of Hugh, Megan Smoleniak. Smoleniak, that's right, folks. The article's researcher said Smoleniak noted 7 of Hillary's 8 great-grandparents were immigrants. So she was just one generation off then. Whatever. I mean, I suppose if you go back far enough, we're all the descendants of immigrants, but that doesn't sound nearly as good as Well, all my grandparents came from overseas. You know, it's like they feel inauthentic, so they just gotta make stuff up in order to, and then try to point to it as authentic, authenticizing them. I mean, for whatever it's worth, 2 of my 4 grandparents were immigrants. Yeah, Oscar Sondergeld and Louise Marie Jaeger Sondergeld emigrated from Germany in the 1920s. Came right through Ellis Island. So in other words, I am more authentic. I have a more son of immigrants or descendant of immigrants cred. I have more cred on that than Hillary Clinton does. Yeah, 2 of my 4 grandparents really were immigrants. Only one of hers was. But she claimed that all of them were. Just for the record, let's see, Donnie Radcliffe, the Washington Post reporter who chronicled First Ladies and wrote a biography of Hillary, tells a similar ancestry tracing only Hugh Rodham Sr. as foreign-born. Hillary's maternal grandmother, Della Howell, was born in Illinois in 1902, according to records. She married Edwin Howell, also born in Illinois in 1887. She married him in 1918, according to records. And I'm looking at a 1920 census record listing both their birthplace in Illinois. And her maternal grandfather's World War I draft card also lists his place of birth as Illinois. And there's a lot of records here. As does his World War II draft card. It also lists Hillary's mother, Dorothy, on it, and so on and so forth. I think you get the idea here. Oh, man. So, I mean, is there anything... See, one thing I have always said about Hillary Clinton, well, indeed, one thing I've always said about Barack Hussein Obama, is that he lies constantly, but he lies terribly. He is a terrible liar. But one of the mitigating advantages he has is that if anyone tries to hold him to account for his constant lying, well, he just plays the race card. Hillary Clinton doesn't have that advantage. And having a vagina doesn't appear to be doing much good for her. Hey, it didn't do any good for her in 2008. Again, why would anybody think that if it didn't do any good, if it didn't help her then, why would it help her now? If it didn't help her last time, why would it help her this time? Understand the reason? Is this so difficult to understand? So she's just got to make... I mean, she's a terrible liar. She doesn't really have any identity politics thing to hide behind. And besides, even if being first woman president, even if that was of anywhere near as much value as being the first black president was to Barack Obama, you've got Elizabeth Warren, tan, rested, and ready, waiting in the wings. She brings you the same thing. She brings you Hillary 1992, or circa 1992, without all the baggage, without the Wall Street taint, without the the money grubbing, without the scandals, and so on and so forth. So, I mean, carefully, calculatedly scripted spontaneity. I tell you what, if that isn't Hillary Clinton in a nutshell, I honestly and truly do not know what is. We will, let's see. Yeah. No, oh yeah, here it is, okay. We'll be back right after these commercial words, faux commercial words, on the Hard Starboard Radio Network on this Thursday, April the 16th, 2015. Hang on! Oh, wait a minute. Hi, how are you? Okay, fine. You hadn't turned the Jasmia's camera on yet. Hour number 2, Hard Starboard Radio Network, April the 16th, 2015. Thank you for being along on the ride, whether live or on the podcast. Both are available due to the miracle of digital audio and internet streaming audio as well. Under the category of We Had It Coming, the aforementioned Liz Muir and You Deserve Hillary's bloodless, condescending campaign. An increasingly shallow and risk-averse America gets the most shallow and risk-averse candidate imaginable. The Hillary Clinton presidential campaign, Part 2, is less than a week old, and already reporters and opinionators across America are complaining. She announced via a video the ultimate way to control the message and avoid any engagement with real people or the press. She's undertaking a trip by Mystery Machine. Nothing novel, simply a redux, a replay, a retread, as I mentioned in the first hour, from her 2000 Senate campaign in New York. For now, at least, she's passing on talking policy in any real detail, and she will continue to do so, for obvious reasons. For the foreseeable future, she appears interested in talking about relatively uncontroversial topics like ways families can increase take-home pay, the importance of expanding early childhood education, and making higher education more affordable, or so her advisors told the Associated Press. Among the most exciting thing that has happened to the former Commissar of State in the last week, and this includes her announcement, is visiting a Chipotle a Chipotle restaurant, initially undetected, which I find impossible to believe. I mean, wouldn't all the advanced people bursting in kind of give it away if nothing else did? And subsequently having pictures of her burrito ordering leaked and posted online, like that was purely accidental. In other words, her campaign was the one that leaked it. It's also dull, bland, scripted, planned, typically political, typical La Clinton Nostra. And perhaps, just perhaps, it's what American voters deserve. See, I mean, and the same was always true of Bill Clinton from beginning to end, but the difference is Bill Clinton was a consummate actor. You know, he was the greatest politician, not the greatest president, but the greatest politician, the greatest campaigner who ever lived. And he never stopped campaigning. You know, I said it many times. I said it back, 20 plus years ago. Bill Clinton could convince the Pope to buy a double bed. He could convince the Vatican to put condom dispensers in their men's rooms. He could sell ice to an Eskimo. Bill Clinton he was infinitely persuasive. He could convince you of anything. Hillary Clinton is the diametric opposite. She is a terrible liar. She can't hide behind any identity politics card to deflect accountability and blowback from it. And, you can't be a Clinton if you can't lie well. She lies constantly. She lies terribly. That's not a good combination. But is it what we deserve? Well, after the last two presidential elections, yeah, probably. Americans want to believe that we're a nation of risk takers. Well, not all Americans, obviously. Pioneers, people willing to cast comfort and safety aside to achieve a dream. Well, I'm kind of been involuntarily pressed into that little cul-de-sac, but you know, Constitution Radio, Douglas V. Gibbs. Moving over to AM 1490 KMET Smart Talk Radio. Resuming Saturday, May the 2nd, eventually perhaps moving to afternoon drive time, so, you know, I might not have willingly cast comfort and safety aside, but I was kind of cast aside against my will, but it might end up in the same place. And change the world, or at least resume earning a living. Now, some of us still are those things, but in reality, a lot of us have become something else in recent years. Narcissistic, overly cautious, superficial, reality disconnected, and above all, very, very boring. Even among those of us who loathe the former Madame Commissar, we have become in so many ways just like her campaign promises to be. We are, in effect, ready for Hillary. We have fallen in love with so-called reality television, quote-unquote, which, surprise, is always scripted and directed. We freak out about allowing 10-year-olds to play in the park unsupervised. We are obsessed with social media, posting selfies. By the way, did I ever tell you how much I absolutely detest selfies? As I said many times, including very recently, when I was growing up, selfies were the kind of thing that would make you go blind. And racking up followers, friends, and fans. Now, we frequently reject fully experiencing events and occasions in favor of documenting them, or more accurately, documenting ourselves looking hot or cool at or during them. We veer toward what is comfortable and easy, just like Hillary and the Chipotle visit, where, just for the record, she did not leave a tip. I know, I saw that. I thought, oh, we're all the way down to this now? And that's not a defense of Hillary, but I mean, when you get $14 million for writing a book that nobody read, and you get $200,000 and $300,000 for every speech that nobody listens to, then that you can't cough up a couple bucks for the tip jar. Now, believe me, I am not a tipper. But then again, I don't pretend to be magnanimous, especially with other people's money. But Hillary Clinton's supposed to be a woman of the people. She can't, and the Clintons are worth something like $200 million. She can't cough up a buck for the tip jar. I'll tell you this much: if I was worth $200 million, I would tip. Typically, I don't tip, or especially right now, I don't tip because I don't have the income to tip. If I had $200 million, I'd be tipping. I'd have no problem. I mean, come on, a couple bucks with a tip jar, really? Can't even. Maybe she's so unfamiliar with actually making her own purchases that she doesn't even know about tipping. Maybe she is that out of touch, folks. You ever consider that possibility? We avoid expressing any opinions that could be deemed controversial because it could impede our quest for popularity and acceptance. When someone ruffles feathers even just a little, our tendency is toward outrage, boycotts, public humiliation, and pushing for firings. And sometimes even worse. We reject substance, preferring to focus on things like the optics of taking a sip of water or being photographed looking at a smartphone. We wear modern versions of girdles and package accentuating underwear so we can show off our best selves. Many of us are concerned less with actual learning than just getting a good grade or diploma that we can show off. We think we deserve automatic promotions just for having been around or putting up with some nonsense or other, much as Hillary Clinton supporters, and perhaps even the candidate herself, seems to think she does, or seem to think. Not for all of us, but for many of us, we are the campaign, and the campaign is us. Not that this will stop the whining. Just as people like the semblance of getting a real glimpse into the real housewives of wherever's lives, we like the semblance of a genuinely approachable, relatable, human, real-keeping presidential candidate. By the way, that pretty much describes Scott Walker, in case you were wondering. But when the candidate says something a little too raw, or real, or sarcastic, or even eccentric, as real people might, about abortion or entitlements or cronyism or civil liberties or foreign policy, we freak out. When we have a choice between the more open, straight-talking candidate or the one that does everything through self-managed media so they can control the message to the maximum conceivable degree, we go for the latter. In other words, Republican or the Democrat, we go for the Democrat. When we have a choice between uncomfortable substance and truth, on the one hand, and believe me, political truth these days is nothing but uncomfortable substance, or reality or feel-good talking points and make-believe on the other, we reject reality. We reject substance, we reject truth. We turn aside to myths. We seek out those who will tell us what our itching ears want to hear. When we have a choice between airbrushed images in magazines or seeing the way people actually look, give us the Photoshop. When we have a choice between meeting people in real life with all the potential awkwardness that might entail, or just sitting around texting and Facebook messaging, more and more we seem to go for the virtual. We don't want the sacrifices or pain entitled to really achieve. We prefer the comfort of telling ourselves that we are excelling even when any objective analysis would show that that is at best a half-truth. We don't actually want reality, because reality would be too difficult to cope with. Whether in our entertainment, our jobs, if we have any, our education, our lives, our politics, we just want something that kind of looks like it. Hillary Clinton may appear past her political prime. She never had a political prime in the first place, actually, if you want to know the truth. A constructed, fake, and self-obsessed persona, a boring, risk-averse default option for a party out of touch with many of its would-be constituents and lacking in creativity and ambition. But given the way many Americans lead their lives now, she may also be exactly what they deserve. It's just all as it was inevitably going horribly, horribly wrong. Charles Cook at nationalreview.com today describes it, or rather yesterday, I guess, describes it as Hillary's attempt at an Elizabeth Warren impression. Believe it. How's that for irony? Hillary Clinton is trying to be Elizabeth Warren. Hillary Clinton is aping Elizabeth Warren. You got the genuine article, Democrat base. You telling me that Elizabeth Warren is not going to overtake Hillary Clinton in the next year? Guess again, Riddler. The early days of American political campaigns are always marked by a certain pantomime absurdity. But one could be forgiven, nevertheless, for wondering whether Hillary Rodham Clinton's confused staccato launch has been especially daffy. For an event that has been at least more like 8 years in the making. Last Sunday's confirmation was unusually schizophrenic and almost entirely inchoate. In the morning, we were told that Hillary would be demonstrating her tech savvy by announcing with a video and a tweet. Instead, we got an insipid email from an aide. In the evening, we were informed that Hillary would be driving across the country on a spontaneous, quote-unquote, meet and greet tour. In fact, this idea turned out to be a reprise of a stunt pulled during her 2000 campaign for the Senate. Hillary, we were assured, would be using her trip to engage with everyday people. Instead, she alternated between contriving photo opportunities with members of her constituency and steadfastly ignoring everybody else. In the meantime, her loyalists revealed that they were unsure as to whether or not she was an officially declared aspirant. Brought onto Fox News to discuss the announcement, longtime Hillary consigliere Lanny Davis inexplicably suggested to Megyn Kelly that Hillary hadn't actually launched her candidacy at all. Those who have been surprised that serial journalists have been reduced to reporting on Hillary's preferred type of tea really shouldn't be surprised. Aesthetically, her overture has been a mess. These trivial missteps are interesting, certainly, and it is always diverting to poke fun at the arrogant. But what has been infinitely more fascinating is just how off-kilter Hillary's substance has been as well. Love them or hate them, Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz, Rand Paul, Scott Walker, et al. All have come out of the gate with a clear and distinct pitch. Thus far, by contrast, Hillary has not said anything coherent at all, because she doesn't dare do so. Rather, she has submitted variously A, that the leadership that her party has provided for the United States in the last decade has failed to bring about the change that America needs. Little jab at Barack Hussein Obama. B, that rich, well-connected, politically powerful figures such as herself are what is primarily wrong with the country. And C, that while she is in the race, there will be no platitude that is too banal to share. In so doing, she has set herself up for some obvious and potent criticisms and just an avalanche of ridicule, which is what I'm counting on if I got to talk about this old harridan for the next 12 months. We're talking here, remember, about a woman who has become a critic of income inequality despite being a prime example of it, who has glommed onto the cause of campaign finance reform while planning a $2.5 billion campaign, largely illegally raised, and who has argued that the game is rigged despite being a staunch advocate of precisely the sort of government-led corporatism that ossifies economies and traps people in their places. As someone who opposes a potential Hillary presidency. I can only hope that Hillary's likely opponents have noticed that far from radiating confidence, the Democrats' inevitable candidate... Well, she's not inevitable. That's the next item on the stack here. That the Democrats' candidate has, so far, has begun her bid by dancing a delicate dance. Each and every election, a great deal of ink is spilled explaining the grave difficulty that Republican candidates tend to have in in reconciling their primary and their general election campaigns. In order to win the nomination, the conventional wisdom has it, the GOP's hopefuls need to tack right. Having got the nod, however, they are obliged to disavow their prior severity and move back to the center, which, of course, is the diametric opposite of what actually wins. As a rule, though, less attention is paid to the same dynamic on the left. And this time around, at least, that might be a mistake. Indeed, if the last few days are anything to go by, we seem now to be witnessing the beginning of a strange, perhaps unique, shadow primary, in which Hillary is attempting to maneuver not around the American public, but around an array of invisible but potent Obamunist opponents. And contra Mr. Cook here, it is very likely, in fact, it's a guarantee that Elizabeth Warren is going to successfully topple Hillary. In fact, Elizabeth Warren is the anointed one, not Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton thinks she's the anointed one, but she isn't. Trust me, folks. But with the vast majority of Democrats hoping earnestly for a challenger of some sort, they can certainly do some real damage, and Pocahontas will take her out. Barack Obama did 8 years ago. Pocahontas will this time. Hillary appears to know this, and she appears to be reacting to it. This, I think, represents a double-edged sword. By taking on the priorities of the Democrat base, Hillary, or trying to anyway, Hillary is sending important signals to her dissidents, but she is also fighting on deeply uncomfortable terrain and playing with a host of themes that could well come back to bite her in her big fat ass. It has been noted acerbically in recent days that it is possible to be both a wealthy patrician and a beloved champion of the working class. Indeed, history shows that both Teddy Roosevelt and Franklin Roosevelt were just that, but there are some subtle differences between Roosevelt and Hillary. Differences that those who make glib comparisons often assiduously ignore. It's one thing to lament that the deck is stacked in favor of those already at the top, when one got to the top by virtue of one's birth, but it is quite another to do so when one was born into no no great wealth and now enjoys tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars of wealth. The former acknowledgement is music to the ears of the dispirited aspirational class, a good chunk of which is now wondering why it hasn't made it. The latter, by contrast, looks downright peculiar. I made it from modest beginnings, Hillary seems to be saying, but you can't. And how she made it was by marrying the right guy. She's never done a damn thing. Certainly, FDR took sharp shots at the malefactors of great wealth, but he did so as an inheritor, not a producer. And Hillary is neither one. Tuesday afternoon, during a stop in Iowa, Hillary griped aloud that there's something wrong when CEOs make 300 times more than the American worker. Yeah, she actually said the singular American worker. We're down to one worker left, huh? That's interesting. Presumably, many American workers would agree, assuming there's more than the one. Again, though, this criticism rings a touch hollow when made by a woman who has recently been making $300,000 per speech, peddling little more than political influence, and who was paid $14 million to write a book in which nobody was remotely interested. Paul Begala may be an unconscionable hack, but he is onto something real when he confirms that the greatest gift the Democrat Party had in 2012 was Mitt Romney's ostensibly plutocratic mien. Say what she will, Hillary is going to have an elitist problem. Especially if she goes up, well, she won't get the chance to go up against Scott Walker. Is there anybody in the race, one wonders, who is less suited to complaining about pay? Remember, Scott Walker mows his own lawn. Point that out again. Equally odd is that Hillary has picked up the mantle of campaign finance reform. Yes, I told you this is going to be a hootenanny today. We need to fix our dysfunctional political system and get unaccountable money out of it once and for all. Yeah, bleep the First Amendment. Yeah, there you go. That's the ticket. That's what Hillary told students yesterday. Or told him Tuesday. Even if it takes a constitutional amendment. Yeah, like that had ever happened. Taken at face value, this is a fairly standard remark, for a Democrat anyway, and one that we have become accustomed to hearing from Democrats in the last half-decade, at least. Since 2010, Citizens United has become a veritable obsession on the left, because they hate the First Amendment that much. Much as to say Benghazi to a conservative is to hit harshly at his knee, or someplace further, a little further north, so to utter the words corporation and Supreme Court in the same sentence is to induce involuntary conniptions in the Obamunist nervous system. In their reflexive frenzy, however, most critics of the court's decision forget, or ignore, that the case was about what the case was actually about. Contrary to the common belief, Citizens United neither invented the legal notion of corporate personhood, that goes back almost 2 centuries, nor granted the right of free expression to corporate entities for the first time. This happened during the Second World War. Rather, it confirmed in general that the federal government was prohibited from limiting the political speech of corporations, associations, unions, and other collective entities. And it determined specifically that the First Amendment protected the speech rights of a group of conservative Americans who wished to pool their resources and to put out a video that was critical of a presidential candidate. And who was that presidential candidate? Hillary Clinton. Does anyone doubt, Glenn Greenwald asked over at Salon in 2010, that the facts that gave rise to this case, namely the government's banning the release of a critical film about Hillary Clinton by Citizens United, is exactly what the First Amendment was designed to avoid? And does anyone doubt that the First Amendment bars the government from restricting the speech of organizations composed of like-minded citizens who band together in corporate form to work for a particular cause? Alas, it is clear that many do indeed doubt these things, or at least that they are prepared to undermine those crucial protections in the name of hobbling their opponent's power. In and of itself, such a view is unseemly and myopic. Constitutional questions aside, it is an act of breathtaking illiberalism to propose that the state should decide which political organizations are to be permitted to speak around election time and which are not, but that Hillary Clinton is among the people advancing this view is nothing short of, well, it's not extraordinary to me, Chuck. I'll tell you, you should not. Is there anything less surprising than that Hillary Clinton is among the people advancing this view? Hillary is one of the most powerful, well, richest perhaps, I don't know about powerful, people in the world. As we have seen this very week, she is able to get her message out wherever and whenever she wishes, often at no cost and via a media whose speech rights her proposed constitutional alteration would leave intact, of course. We are currently living in a country in which Hillary Clinton orders a burrito as headline news. Actually, it was a burrito bowl, but who's counting? That she would seek to undermine the capacity of less powerful Americans to band together and respond to her dominance. Well, dominance. I wouldn't say she's dominant. We're going to see just how undominant she really is in the months ahead. Thereby implicitly endorsing a law that, but for the court, would have had the practical effect of silencing her opponents, which is, of course, the goal of every Democrat. Should tell us a great deal about the woman. Of course, shouldn't tell us anything we didn't already know if we've been paying attention for the past 25 years. Perhaps she will lobby for the return of seditious libel, too? Yes, she will! Well, maybe not. For in truth, Hillary probably does not care a great deal about either money in politics, well, she cares about her money in politics, or about CEO pay, especially since most CEOs are Democrats anyway. It is possible, nay probable, that Hillary leans farther to the left than does her husband. Yeah, I think that's always been a safe assumption. But whatever differences exist between them, neither of the Clintons is a wild-eyed... Well, no, she is. It's just that she's been jaded by all this money-grubbing and scandal, which is, again, why Elizabeth Warren will come to be seen as Hillary circa 1992 without all that taint, without all that scandal baggage, without all the money-grubbing. Bill was an electable, poll-driven moderate, not Hillary. Although she is cozy with Wall Street, friendly with the wealthy, because most wealthy people are Democrats, and entirely comfortable with corporate America and its supposed excesses. Which is why the left so enthusiastically embraces hypocrisy. Right tribe, wrong tribe. It's okay if they do it. We do it by definition even if we don't. If Hillary's early days have been marked by Warren-esque populism, and again, why bother with pretend Elizabeth Warren when you got the real thing? It is not because she believes that it will be an electoral winner, or because she lies awake at night worrying about social justice, or even because she hopes that it will help her fight back against the many out-of-touch epithets that her potential opponents are at present fermenting. No, it's because she wants to win the Democrat nomination. That's what it is. Indeed, it is because of political expediency demands cynicism, and Hillary Rodham Clinton is nothing if not a cynic. If played smartly, that cynicism will provide her critics with a golden opportunity. To placate Elizabeth Warren is to sound like Elizabeth Warren. To win the hearts of Nutroots Nation is to speak the words that their seduction demands. The gap between Hillary Rodham Clinton, the general election candidate, which she will never be, and Hillary Rodham Clinton, the panderer and candidate for the Democrat nomination, is enormous, and it is pronounced. Now, there's never going to be a difference because she's never going to be a general election candidate. Conservatives should ensure that voters are watching as she wanders nervously into the middle of it. But here again, the more Hillary Clinton tries to sound like Elizabeth Warren, the more clear it's going to be that Elizabeth Warren should be the Democrat nominee. I have literally been saying, not to channel Joe Biden or anything, but I have literally been saying for years that Hillary Clinton is not going to be the 2016 Democrat nominee. Forget becoming president. She's not going to be the 2016 Democrat nominee. Remember her inevitability in 2008? How'd that turn out? And again, if she couldn't win in 2008 when it was all laid out for her, inaugurational, processional, everything, she was she was the front runner, she was going to win, she was inevitable, and then what happened? A darling and champion of the nut roots submarined her. And if it could happen when she had her best shot in 2008, what makes anybody think it won't happen again when she is in a much weaker position in 2016? You know who else has come around to that conclusion? Rush Limbaugh. Yes, that's right, folks. Rush Limbaugh is echoing me. It's just that I've been saying this for several years. Rush Limbaugh's finally come around to my way of thinking. That Mrs. Clinton just can't pull it off. Why? Because she is the diametric, the polar opposite in terms of personality, in terms of lying skill, in terms of political instincts and charisma and everything else. She is the diametric opposite of her husband. Bill Clinton was the greatest political tactician ever. Hillary Rodham Clinton is the worst. The most overrated Paul ever. And you know who else agrees with that view? You know who else has joined me on Hillary will never be the 2016 Democrat nominee island? Would you believe Meghan McArdle? That's right. At BloombergView.com, Hillary Clinton is not inevitable. No, you're not alone, Megan. You're not alone among commentators in being bearish on Hillary Clinton. Not she can't, well, okay, you're not as bearish as I am. Well, at least you're headed in the right direction. She can't win, folks. Meghan McArdle has gotten to the point where she thinks it's less than 50-50 that Hillary can win. You're getting there. Come on, just a little bit further, because she can't win. But she asks the question, why is everyone else convinced she's a lock? Because of the conventional wisdom. Enough people say it must be true. If you believe the wisdom of crowds argument, what did I just tell you? The answer is that we're wrong and everyone else is right. Well, this crowd is composed of mostly left-leaning journalists and academics who down in their heart of flinty little black hearts really don't think Hillary can win either, but they feel guilty if they even admit it to themselves, so they really force the enthusiasm, but it isn't real, like I mentioned the other day. So there might be a wee bit of sample bias. Jonathan Chait has a smart piece, that'd be a switch, in New York Magazine on why Hillary is probably going to win. Well, here's I don't know if it's necessarily all mine, but certainly Meghan McArdle's bear side case for why she won't. Number one, she's old. Old! Older than the hills on Granny's chest. 90 years older than God old. Ah, that's right, I said it! Here's my Mark Levin impression for the day. Hillary Rodham Clinton is going to be 69 on Election Day 2016. Just barely younger than Ronald Reagan was when he was first elected. And he was the oldest president in American history, if you will recall. We can argue that this is not fair, but fair or not, it's going to matter, especially since old women are less, shall we say, viable carry their age a lot worse than old men do. If she were going to be the 2016 Democrat nominee, which she won't be, any opponent would look young and vigorous next to her. And I suspect that it matters most for a woman, or more for a woman than for a man, like I just alluded to. If you think that discrimination against older workers is real, you have to think this is going to be a factor. Her age is a risk for another reason. People in their late 60s and early 70s are vulnerable to health events. Now calm down, I'm not saying that Hillary is likely to die on the trail, although I wonder if that would bring her any sympathy. I'm sure she has top-notch doctors and her life expectancy is, well, at least average, you know. But say she has a burst appendix, as happened to Miss McCardle's mother at that age. She'd be off the campaign trail for a minimum of a month, and a burst appendix is only one of the many non-life-threatening things that hit older people harder than the young, from pneumonia to shingles. Obviously, these things could happen to any candidate, but they are more likely to happen to Hillary than to her, well, even to Elizabeth Warren. Who is her opponent. And if one does, it will not only hurt her campaigning, it will also plant questions in voters' minds about her physical ability to do the job. There is, of course, a possibility that she could drive turnout among older voters, but I'm sort of skeptical. Miss McCardle's mother, a.k.a. the swing voter, says she knows she would no longer have the physical stamina to be president, and that actually biases her against Hillary. McCardle has heard the same from several 70-plus folks. Number two, it's not clear that she would outperform Barack Obama with women. Hillary beat Rick Lazio in 2000 for the New York Senate seat by a shocking percentage among women, 20 percentage points. But that's in New York State, where there are a lot of unmarried women. Married women actually lean Republican. And Obama already carried women 55 to 60% in 2012. Realistically, how much higher can she drive that percentage or turnout among women voters? Moreover, there are trade-offs. Democrats outperformed among women, but they underperformed among men. Hillary seems to be planning a platform heavy on items designed to appeal to female voters, such as paid family leave, but these actually appeal to a pretty narrow segment of the population. Young single women and those with small children, where Democrats already do very well. There's the risk that these gain her voters among folks who are already strong Democrats, while costing her votes in segments she would need to pick up. Especially since any serious promise of these things is going to have to come with a plan for paying its hefty price tag. Number three, it's doubtful she'll replicate Obama's turnout among black voters. Obama brought a lot of black voters to the polls for the same reasons that Catholic voters, especially Irish Catholics, lined up around the block to vote for Al Smith and John F. Kennedy. The first president from a group that has historically faced discrimination is naturally going to drive higher turnout among that group, but that doesn't mean they'll keep turning out in the same numbers or even for the same party. 20 years after JFK, a lot of Irish Catholics were voting Republican. I expect that blacks will continue to be a strong constituency for Democrats, at least for a few more years. But I doubt they will come to the polls for Hillary in the same way they did to vote for the first black president, or actually technically the second black president, because Bill Clinton was the first black president, if you recall. Now that means that she has to make up those votes elsewhere. But by the way, Bill Clinton, he must have been white chocolate. Number four, the emerging Democrat majority isn't. It was a mirage, like it always is. Chait thinks it still holds, but it doesn't. Mostly because there really isn't any such thing as a permanent coalition. The bigger your coalition, the bigger its internal tensions. Coalitions can collapse suddenly and without warning. Who in 1976 would have predicted 1980? Well, I did, and hell, I was in junior high school at the time. Number 5, there's a real risk. There's a real risk that the Depression will get even worse. The Obama Depression. You see, the Depression never ended. It didn't end in 2009. It has never ended. It's remained. We've been bumping along the bottom. And it is possible to have recessions within depressions, by the way. It's just something to keep in mind. And given who still is president, and that this Congress is ratcheting up the spending, which means ratcheting up already unsustainable debt, and of course the Federal Reserve continuing to print worthless fiat currency, and there are stories about the Chi-Coms replacing the dollar as the world's reserve currency, and so I mean, there's so many different directions from which we can, the economic death blow can come internally, externally, and it will come. It's just a question of when. There are all sorts of reasons why this could happen. I just described several of them. Another would be oil prices going back up. Not the Fed tightening. They'll never do that for reasons I just described. And any of the other mysterious things, there's nothing really all that mysterious about it, that cause recessions or a worsening of depressions. If there's another, worsening of the depression after years of no growth, Hillary is not going to be president. She's not going to be the nominee, so it doesn't really matter. Even if by some miracle she were to get in, odds are high that an ill-timed worsening of the Depression would deny her a second term. Although if she could get in, I don't know what could keep her away from a second term, actually. Number 6, she's not a this is putting it lightly. She's not a particularly good candidate. Oh, really? Wow, I never would have thought, never would have guessed that. She has never won a tough election. In fact, she's only won in deep blue New York, which is not exactly playing against the varsity. On the stump, she is nowhere near the appeal of her husband, or even Barack Obama. She's a terrible speaker. She's not inspiring. She doesn't come off as warm. Her tone ranges from well-coached to annoyed. You might call her... Now, I wouldn't call her the Mitt Romney of the Democrats. Mitt Romney didn't come off as lacking warmth. Might not have been inspiring, but he came off as a nice guy. That certainly doesn't describe Hillary Clinton. 7, all the Clinton baggage is going to come back to haunt her. Americans love their presidents, in retrospect. Even George W. Bush is starting to attract some warm, fuzzy feelings for his foray into painting and his admirable determination not to go around trying to conduct shadow policy debates. All the things we hated about the Clintons, from the financial scandals to the pardons, have faded into distant memory. As soon as Hillary goes on the stump, however, we've already started to have flashbacks. Indeed, with the email mess, they've already started. Number 8, unlike fine wine, presidential parties do not age well. Neither is Hillary. There's evidence that voters get sick of the ruling party after a while and want a change, even if things seem to be doing okay, which they're not. Now, we don't have that many elections to go by, as this just covers the post-war period. The theory could be wrong, but no, it's really not. But it makes a certain amount of sense. In fact, it makes a great deal of sense. The longer a party has been in office, the staler its ideas seem, and the more time there has been for scandals to accumulate. And in Hillary's case, she comes prepackaged with scandals of her own. It's just less motivating to turn out for your party's third presidential term than it was for the first, when your base was fired up and a substantial number of independents were sick of the party in office. In other words, here come the pendulum. And finally, number 9, Obama's approval ratings do not make for coattails of any kind, or negative coattails of anything. In the last 4 years of his presidency, Bill Clinton's approval ratings averaged over 60%. Nonetheless, his not particularly appealing vice president barely fought the election to a statistical draw. Obama, meanwhile, has struggled to break 40%. Maybe those ratings are going to shoot up for the last year, assuming it is the last year, but I wouldn't count on that. Not that it matters to him. But that would take some shooting to get Hillary into inevitable territory. That's the bear case, and Miss McCardle, you have no idea. But you know, there is one thing, and one thing only, that could make Hillary Clinton inevitable. Want to know what it is? She could come out of the closet and announce that she's a lesbian. In fact, the National Enquirer reports that that's a lot what made up a lot of those deleted emails. If she came out of the closet and announced that she's a lesbian, she could become the first lesbian president. And that, I think, really would be enough to carry her to the White House. I wonder if she'll have the courage to calculate her way into that kind of spontaneity. We'll see you tomorrow at Open Thighs Fridays, 22 hours from now, blogtalkradio.com/HSR Network. See you then.